Hello friends and subscribers, welcome back to Daniel's Tech World here on YouTube. My name is Daniel Rosehill. This is my tech corner of YouTube where I periodically and somewhat irregularly upload videos about tech subjects that are of interest to me. And what I'm going to be doing today is just showing a workflow I've developed for using voice prompting and using prompts in what I think a little bit of a creative manner, if I can give myself that compliment, for using code generation projects in RuCode. RuCode is an offshoot of the Cline project. Now, if you've been using AI for code generation for, perhaps however long it is since this became a huge thing, a huge force in the world of technology, which is really only probably about a year and a half at this point, although it feels like a lifetime. But you might be familiar with going into tools like ChatGPT or ChatGPT with code and asking the AI tool to generate a script, Python, Bash, edit a script, debug a script. And that's great, but you're essentially serving as the intermediary between your code base and the large language model. Now, of course, you have tools like GitHub Copilot and the rest of them that take that to the next level and come into your IDE. And this tool, Cline and RuCode, is to me almost like a slightly level beyond that. It's got true agentic capabilities of actually doing things in your code base and seeing that all as context, and it just works very seamlessly. Not perfectly, it does get stuck, especially for more complicated projects. I found I was developing an NFC writer using this a few days ago, and it was hellish to try to get it to debug, but I finally got there. I got a fully functional NFC reader writer tool for the Linux desktop, which was the product of necessity. I couldn't find it, and AI made it. I also created a dual WhatsApp client, a landing page for my business, and these all took like a couple of hours as opposed to days. So it's pretty crazy. What I'm going to show you guys, so there's been interesting videos on YouTube about developing websites with AI, and I always try to do something a little bit different. So those are the things I want to show, the prompting and the system I have going on for prompting. So here's what we're going to be doing today. I'm picking an intentionally, kind of stupid project for demonstration purposes. I have this delightful sloth stuffed animal in my possession, and I'm actually using this. His name is Cornelius, and I'm actually trying to do some creative things with him in the realm of animation. So there's these Runway ML is fascinating tool for taking still images and bringing animation to them. So that's why I'm aggregating all these little shots of before and after. So what we're going to be doing is making just a demonstration static website for this clearly persona character. Okay. So what I've done is I've set up a GitHub repository and I've added in a few images so we can do something like show a gallery of the sloth, and I'm going to now show you how I do the voice prompting. So let's jump in again, and I'll just go into Ru. The reason I've kind of grounded around this workflow is the typical way you do this is you write your prompts in this part of the tool. Now, Cline looks very, very similar. You have a little text box and you put something in. You use the @ key, as it says, to give context. So I can point it to a file, say like, hey, the prompt's here. Now, what I was thinking when I was doing my first projects with this, I'm going to take down the photo of the sloth because it's a bit distracting, is why not use prompts as a folder and point the code editor to your prompt? And that's exactly what I've been doing. I think if I can just give my experience in using AI for code generation, I really like keeping my prompts versioned in a folder in the repository. I call these dev prompts because I don't know what the better word for them is. But what you can also do is add log files. If you're debugging something, a script, and you're getting long logs back, let's say you're trying to deploy something onto Netlify and it just doesn't work and it gives you a whole bunch of logs, what you can actually do is create that as a file in the repo, in a logs file, and then point the tool to that for debugging. And again, I found this approach works very nicely. So what I'm doing is I'm created a folder in my repository called dev prompts. I'm going to call this site creation spec, and I'm using voice prompting, as I've mentioned, because it is just quicker to speak than it is to type generally. So let's just go. I'm going to turn on voice mode here in VS Code, and I'm just going to kind of freeform it a bit, and then we'll tidy up and fix some of the things that were wrong. But I'm just doing this to show you how I would, how I write these now, or type these. The key for prompting large language models is to be extremely, extremely specific. The only time LLMs, I say, really fail me is when there's any ambiguity. So your task in prompting for something like a website is you got to go into all the details. Don't kind of think you're talking to a human where you might say, yeah, I'm building a website for my business. You're talking to a robot and you need to spell out every little thing that you can. Now, Claude has a huge context window of 200k tokens. So you can basically be as expansive as you like. You don't need to worry about running out of context. And the other good thing is that these code generation copilots have a little context window display, so you can always see where you are relative to that context window. So I'm going to do my site creation prompt now, and let's give this a shot. Develop a personal landing page website for me. My name is Cornelius, and I am a sloth. I'd like a single page landing site that can be deployed onto Netlify. I have written site text in the homepage.md file in the repository, and I've added some images of me into the images that are nested under the gallery folder. Use the text that I've drafted and use the images. I'd also like to have a nice, attractive badge directing to my Instagram profile. The goal is to make the website fun and quirky and honor my personality as a sloth. So try to use some creative fonts and designs and make sure that it also renders nicely on mobile devices. Okay, now I've used this exact process to build actual websites I need and not just this little demo project, but that's the general idea. Is you want to kind of tell it, give it like kind of almost a map for the repo. Now you can actually specify that, point to a specific file with the @ functionality as we saw. But in my experience, the MCP code generation thing is good enough that you can just tell it there's a gallery folder and it'll scan the repo quickly and find that folder. You don't need to be that exact unless you've got perhaps many different ones. So now that I've written my site creation prompt, I'm going to open up RuCode, as it's called, and I'm going to say, now all you actually need to do here is say something like this: generate the website, the spec is, and then you're pointing off to the spec file. So it's dev prompts and then site spec.md. So just when you're doing this, when you're in the kind of pointing window, as I call it, make sure that you're pointing to the specific markdown file containing your prompt. You can see it's detected two matches for dev prompt. The first is the folder. The second is the exact markdown file that I just wrote. So you want to make sure you're pointing to the exact file. And that is it. Okay. Sorry, that's the process that's all I really wanted to show in this video. But let's see how it manages with this website. So now that I've done that, go ahead, and we're now actually beginning the process. Now you can see the way that it kind of parses these prompts. It kind of does it quite. It breaks it down, and we're off and running. It's begun to create the index file, and I'm just going to pause the video here because we're after the first iteration. This is going to take a little bit of time. It's going to create some. You can see now it's built out the index. Now it's doing the CSS. If you haven't used these tools before, this is what it is. It's really kind of matrix-like. You can literally step away from your computer. You can take a shower and watch it do its thing, basically. And it tells you there in the sidebar exactly what's going on, and it looks at the website. So it seems to have kind of actually got the most of it so far. We've used up 12 cents in API costs. I'm using Claude Sonnet 3.5 as my large language model here, and it has the ability. Now I'm running on Linux, which I did not personally expect that it would work this well. Linux, you've always got compatibility issues, especially with a small, a lesser known distro. Now you can see it's actually already, I'm looking at what it's generated, and it's not bad. There we've got the photos of the sloths there, and it's scrolling down. It's got the Instagram button. Now inevitably there's going to be one or two small. It's actually seeing that the Instagram badge isn't loading correctly, but it's fixing that up autonomously by going through the index and making those changes. And it looks like we're going to be very close to the final product of this website on the first iteration. So let's take a pause here and we'll come back to it when it's finished up with its V1. Okay, so this is what it has cooked up in its proper display. It's a single page HTML file, which is actually amazing because, it's done all the hard work of making the CSS and it looks pretty good. I mean, in terms of, I think it's got a little, it's even added a footer. This is kind of the cool part, is it does these little touches. One prompt that you can use, and I just encourage people to use, is do stuff like, say, sometimes I'll prompt for specific UI fixes or CSS fixes, and I'll say, I can see this doesn't look the best. But given that you're working with a large language model, which has its kind of innate creative capabilities, you can actually say, yeah, I don't think it's quite looking right, but I can't put my finger on it. You have latitude. Think of some fixes, make those fixes. And again, it's really about being specific, being very instructional to the model, saying you are in the driver's seat, don't feel constrained by just making the changes that I want. So let's just take one example change, right? We have the kind of 4 images here laid out in a single row. And let's say I said, I think I'd prefer that as a 2x2 grid. Now, this is where you can use the same method. Now, just imagine, again, this is a more elaborate project, and we, instead of having one fix, we have maybe a bunch of fixes at one time. So what I would do is I'm going to go into the dev prompts folder again, which is just, again, my nomenclature for how I like to work. And I'm going to say fixes1.md. And I'm going to say list of fixes for V1. Home page. I'm just going to type this time homepage gallery instead of the current layout, 1 row of 4 images. Make it a 2x2 grid. Now, the same exact methodology that we used before, I'm going to go into my root code. And I'm actually, sometimes it's just best practice. You can see we've started a fresh task here, I think. No, we haven't. Now, the decision as to when to lose context is deliberate. Or I would recommend is deliberate, because you have context, but if you don't need the prior context, you can start a new task and kind of set a blank slate. Now, this isn't just about saving tokens on the API. It's about thinking, when is the prior context going to be helpful? When is it going to be potentially confusing? And in my case, I'm like, doesn't really need to know the whole process up to now. I'm going to deliberately start from scratch. So because I'm doing that, I'm going to have to repeat some things. This is a personal 1-page landing site. I love it, but one small fix detailed here. And what I'm going to do again is point the code assistant to my markdown file describing what I want changed, and watch it hopefully manage. Of course, good practice, if you're doing this versioning, make sure to commit and push between versions, basically not what I'm doing currently. So it's, making short work of this. It's already kind of seeing what's going on. It's looking at the styling, and we're going to get the grid that I specified in just a couple of moments. Again, I'll pause here. And although actually it works so quickly, I don't even have time to drink a sip of water. It's already done that, and it just has this nice thing of checking. You can see it's got the browser log here. It looks good. It looks like it's already fixed it. Something that I think is exceptionally powerful about these code editors that have context of your project right away is not only can you ask them to work on code for you, there's 2 other things that are really, really useful in my opinion. You can just ask them to work on documentation. I've done that. I've said, here's a GitHub repository, or you're in a GitHub repository. I need a data dictionary. I need a README page, or I need these updates to the README page, or you're in a website. So you can do all of those things. The other thing that you can do, and again, I'm deliberately going to lose context here, is you can ask for deployment instructions. So this is a single page website. I would like to deploy onto Netlify. Can you give me instructions on how to do so? So if you're using a framework that you haven't worked with before, like it could be, I don't know, a Next project or Astro, and you know that there are some specificities around the deployment, and you've got the build command, you've got the site, all these little kind of finicky details that can make or break the deployment, you can ask it to get information about that. So it's telling me to use a GitHub repository, which we've already done, and we should be able to just do static site serving from just from the root, because the files here, this was a very simple build intentionally, are all going to be at the root. So let's try to actually do that. I don't know, I'll give it some kind of ridiculous URL like the sloth at Netlify or something, and this will be the final stage, and hopefully this will deploy without trouble. Okay, so we're in the Netlify deployment thing now, which sometimes makes me nervous just being here, because I have memories of trying to debug deployments previously, and I just given this a URL. It's a single static website, so we should be able to deploy this now where I'm watching the deployment build. It's at the building stage, and I'll go in and check the logs now, and hopefully it'll flash online in just a second. So this was probably the only Netlify project that I've just worked the first time, which is always a nice feeling. And we can see it's successfully deployed, and we can see also the build structure that Cline created has been accurately mirrored on the deployment build. Let's go ahead now and check whatever URL that I set for this project, open production deploy, to see if this renders correctly on the public internet. Okay, so there you have it. Here's my very messy bookmarks, and jerusalemsloth.netlify.app is online. It's been deployed with Netlify. We have our gallery, we have our Instagram badge, we have our footer, and all that really took 5 minutes from start to finish, I would say, of actual active kind of ideation, spec definition, one quick iteration, and getting it out there. So if you need a single page, a landing page for your business, for your resume website or whatever, this is really a game changer. This just makes it vastly quicker to iterate these, and you can be in control of, you can use these static site generating frameworks, which are really, really great when they work, when they deploy nicely, and all that kind of tedious process of fixing. See, some people might like it. I personally, it's a little bit too detailed for me, but rather than doing all that wrestling with code for hours, you can kind of take a higher level overview, work with the AI bot and say, okay, I like this, change this, and reach a final product that you're very happy with. So that's my process of writing out your prompts in the repository. That's my innovation. The rest of it is just standard how you use Cline and root code. Hope that was of interest. Thanks for watching, and more videos will be coming soon.